If you look around, you can see volunteers wearing blue shirts. These are the people who put this conference together. They're volunteers and part of the charity Nashi that is making changes to end human trafficking. Let's show them some love for their hard work. And so that's why we're all here today. Awareness, education, making changes to end human trafficking. One man who's here with us today decided to make a change. He'll tell you how, he'll tell you why. He'll tell you about how he and his brother couldn't sit by and watch this happen. How they've built an organization called Free the Children, and how you can get started in your lives, and your schools and your communities to join his efforts. Free the Children has built more than 650 schools in 16 countries. Craig has received 9 honorary doctorates for his work in education and human rights. He's traveled to over 50 countries working to end human trafficking and speaking on how to do it. And before I bring him out, I just have one quick thing. Tim in the red shirt here has been hired by Nashi to photograph and videotape the event. If you don't want your pictures used, just let him know at some point today, and he'll make sure that you're not in any of the photographs or videos. Craig is only one man, but he is where it all started. Let us please give him the attention he deserves and listen to his story so that we may be part of the solution to end modern-day slavery. Ladies, gentlemen, let us give a big Saskatchewan welcome to today's keynote speaker, Craig Keilburger.
How you doing this morning? Now, I'm going to ask a favor. They're all the wonderful people that T-Bone called out wearing the blue. They're from Nashi. They're all hiding in the back, however. So can I ask them to all take a giant step forward to please come on inside for just a moment. They don't know this is happening. Please bear with me. So come, please, come on inside. Now, can I ask all of them here, all the students, all the teachers, these people in blue, they all have day jobs. They work, they are in the community. They're the ones who help to organize and spearhead to make this possible. Their organization that for the past 8 years has been working against human trafficking. Would you please recognize them with a huge round of applause? Definitely want to give them a round of applause because they're doing the lunch. So that's a good round of applause. So I have the pleasure to meet the woman who's now walking just back down the aisle, Celia, who's literally walking over there, who was the person who they nicknamed, and I know this was someone's great love, the Quiet Commandant, the leader who's helped to coordinate a lot of the volunteers. A huge thank you for having the vision that gave birth to this. Thank you. It's an honor for me to stand here because of all the issues, and I believe every issue is important, whatever your passion is, the call of this is to take action, whatever your passion is. But an issue that is incredibly close to my heart is the issue of human trafficking. You know, T-Bone spoke about Free the Children. It was an organization like Nashi that was inspired because of the issue of human trafficking. So can I just ask by a show of hands, how many students we have here from grade 12? Oh, okay, not many. Grade 11? Some. Grade 10? Okay. Grade 9? Grade 8? Grade 7? Grade 6? said at one point, I was getting ready for school, and probably like yourself this morning, was reaching for breakfast, reaching for a bowl of cereal, and I stopped when I saw on the front page a headline. Now, I was looking for the comics at the time. Can I ask how many of you have ever heard of the story, heard of the life of Iqbal Masih? Okay, so some. So now, Iqbal is probably my greatest hero. He is a young boy who, when he was 4 years old, he was sold. The modern day slavery, human trafficking, his family took out something called a pesci debt. So they desperately needed money, and they pledged him as collateral against a loan. So you know how here in Canada, if we need money, you go to a bank, you ask for a loan, you pledge a house, you pledge a car as collateral. The family was so poor they owned nothing, so they literally pledged their child. And when they couldn't repay, Iqbal was taken away from his family. He was sold to work in a carpet factory, and he was forced to sit in front of a loom and every day to tie thousands and thousands of tiny knots, weaving hand-knotted carpets, like the type that end up in wealthy nations, countries like Canada. Some of the workshops later on today will be talking about how sometimes, even indirectly and by accident, our consumption choices help continue the realities of slavery and human trafficking. And so this young boy, when he was 10 years old, he escapes. Now Iqbal starts to tell his story. He goes to villages in rural parts of Pakistan. He starts to educate families how not to be tricked, not to let their children be sold, not to end up in conditions of human trafficking. Human rights groups hear him, invite him to America, to Europe. He starts telling his story, becomes famous. He would stand in front of groups of students, and he'd stand in front of them, and his message was so simple. He'd hold a carpet tool in one hand and a pencil in the other, and he said every single child deserves the right to hold a pencil, and no one should ever be forced to hold a tool. And he said this again and again and again, and articles written about his life. Carpet sales began to fall, people got very angry, and when he went home to Pakistan, he was riding his bicycle in front of his house, just playing. But at the age of 12, he was shot dead. He was assassinated at 12 years of age for being a human rights activist, for fighting on the issue of stopping human trafficking. Now, so I woke up in the morning, I saw that headline, Battle Child Labor, Boy 12 Murdered. And I read the story. Now, I had just learned in school about the Underground Railroad into Canada. So how many people studied that in school? I learned about Lincoln. He freed the slaves. How many people study that? Really? Only that many? Civil War? How many of you studied in school about human trafficking? Handful. I had never heard of them before. I had no idea that was the reality in our world. I got to the end of that article, and there were two emotions, two thoughts running through my mind. The first was disbelief that in our world today, you can still buy and sell a human being. Just think of how crazy that idea is. Nothing more fundamental exists than our freedom, and you can buy and sell a human being. And the second thought that went through my mind was anger that this still existed. And I read the article from the newspaper, and I shoved it in my backpack, and I was taking the bus to school and staring at it and rereading it and thinking I have to do something, I have no idea what. And so I got to my grade 7 class, and I just read the story. I didn't even know what to say to them. So I started at the beginning. When Iqbal Masih was 4 years old, his parents sold him into slavery for less than $16. And by the time I got to the end, I said, I need your help. I have no idea what we're going to do, but we have to do something. And I asked the question, will you join me? And when I asked this question, at first, nothing happened. In fact, I remember being so nervous up there, and there was this long pause, and I was staring at my best friend, like willing him to please put up your hand and volunteer. At least one person. And then he put up his hands, and then another, and then another, and then another. So to all the best friends out there, when a friend calls on you for help, to volunteer, to stand up against a bully, to take action in your school when you leave here today on the issue of human trafficking, have your friends back, please. The best friends in the world. Because one person, well, takes two, takes three, takes four, takes five, takes an organization, but it takes a best friend, a one individual, to put up their hand and say, let's do it together. Suddenly that breaks the ice and becomes so much easier. If you don't think of yourself as an activist, I didn't. If you're nervous, I was terrified standing in front of my school, standing in front of my class. But I promise, if you ask, others will join. Even if it's just your best friend to begin. And then it creates a ripple effect. In my case, in front of my class, 11 people put up their hands. So 11 plus me, there were 12 of us. We were all 12 years old. So we proudly named our organization the Group of 12-year-olds. And we thought this was a great name. We were very proud of this name. And it worked for about a whole 2 weeks until one of us had our 13th birthday. And we realized we didn't plan very far with this name. So eventually we changed it to Free the Children. In fact, this was literally us, how we started. With car washes and bake sales, pop bottle drives, a petition. We created a petition to raise awareness on this issue, and only those under 18 could sign it, and went school to school to school, asking other students to join. And it started from April through May, June, July, August. It kept running through September. And September rolls around. And at this point, I knew it was more than just a passing phase. It was something that the more that I learned, the more I realized I couldn't close my eyes. Any of the national volunteers in blue will resonate with this idea, will understand. When you know the reality, you can't go back to your old self. Like after coming to this event today, you can't go back to your old self. If your old self didn't know this existed and chose not to take action, that's okay. But now that you know, you're a changed person. And when I knew I had to do something. And it became such a passion. I wanted to meet these kids. I wanted to look through my own eyes at the reality of human trafficking. And so I sat down with my parents one morning. It was 8th grade. Sorry, what are the 8th grade again? You had the largest contingent. So grade 8, sat down with my mom, my dad. I looked at them, I said, Mom, Dad, I want to take 2 months off school. I want to learn more about human trafficking. I want to go to Asia. And I want to go backpacking through Pakistan, where Iqbal was from, and India, and Bangladesh, and Thailand, and Nepal. And I want to go on my own. Will you let me go? So how many of you think tomorrow morning if you sat down with your mom, your dad, your guardian, and said, I'm thinking of taking 2 months off school, pausing this whole education thing. I'm going to go, kick around 5 countries in Southeast Asia, learning about child labor, human trafficking. How many of you think your folks would say, great idea, why are you planning it? I'll see you later off the airport, you can leave tomorrow. How many think your folks would look at you and say, absolutely positively, no way in the world would we ever in a million years let you do that? Yeah, that's what my mom said to me. She said, Frank, we love you very much, but we grew up outside of the city of Toronto, and she said, whenever we go to Toronto, you're not allowed to take the subway by yourself. So no, you can't go to Asia by yourself. But I asked again the next morning, and 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 I asked, and my mom eventually banned the word Asia in our house. And I asked again, and I asked again, and I asked again, and no one ever said it's going to be easy to follow your heart. But I asked again, and I asked again, and I asked again, and I asked again, and one time my mom, she looked at me and she said, you are not allowed to ask again, you're not allowed to hint, you're not even allowed to think about it. Unless you already had like half the money raised, and you could prove that you'd be safe. Then we could talk. So started shoveling driveways for months to save up the money. Started writing letters to every organization I could find anywhere in Southeast Asia who worked on this issue. End Child Prostitution, Asian Tourism, South Asian Action Coalition, all these groups were sending them out en masse. I asked if I could come learn more about these issues. And when I sent these letters, I didn't quite mention my age. I didn't feel it was a pertinent detail. I also kind of pretended to be my own secretary. I wrote on behalf of the office of Mr. Craig Keilburger. There's a visit from Canada. Will you host? And for all the teachers here who are maybe right now wondering about my parents, I did find a chaperone. He was 25 years old. He was from Southeast Asia originally. He agreed to take me. And so when I was 12, I had my 13th birthday on that trip. Set out through Southeast Asia to learn the realities. And I share that story because that is why I'm standing here today, all these years later. That's why I'm so passionate. You ask any of the volunteers in the blue, they will tell you their equivalent moment. They will tell you the moment when they first realized and learned about this issue. They will tell you the moment where it went from knowledge to a passion. And our hope is that this moment is that moment for you. That again, once your eyes are open, once you learn about the reality, you will leave here, ask yourself, what can you do? Because this is the reality in our world. When you see kids who, whether they are working through the carpet factories like Iqbal, or the brick kilns, where debts are literally passed generation to generation, where children are paying off debts taken by parents or grandparents. When you look at the realities of our world today, this is the world that we're taught about in school. The geographic borders. But this isn't really the world we live in anymore. It's so much more than just the countries that divide us. If you want to look at the world through a different set of eyes, look at it through population. Because this is actually the world that we live in today. We're still there, Canada. But with 33 million people in a world of 7 billion of our fellow human beings, this is us. So absolutely there are issues in our own backyards that we have to take care of. But we absolutely cannot ignore the rest of the world. When you look at the population living on less than $1 a day, what the United Nations defines as absolute poverty, it's the world that we live in. The size of Southeast Asia, parts of Africa. When we look around the world, where is human trafficking endemic? One of the greatest regions would be the Indian subcontinent. So I remember we walked into a village, and a lot of the communities now know the work we do. And so we walked into this one village in a rural, it was the southern part of India, near a region named Chennai. And we walked in, and there was a group of parents, a group of fathers, who were waiting for us. And they told us their story. They explained how a middleman came to their village and promised them a small sum of money in exchange for their children working 1 year in a factory. Now the families were desperate. They didn't have a lot. No one had ever been to school. No one had ever learned how to read or write in this community. And this man came with lots of promises. Showed them a piece of paper, called it a contract. Said all the fathers had to do was to sign their name, and they'd receive this sum of money. Oh, and they'd take good care of the children. Now, no one had ever been to school, no one had ever learned how to read or write, and in India, if you can't read or write, how you sign your name is you take your thumb, and you roll your thumb in ink, and then you put your thumbprint at the bottom of the page. And with that, they sold their child. Now, a year passed, and the fathers described how they went to the factory, how they stood outside, they pounded on the gate, asking for their children to be returned. And they said how the factory owners laughed at them. that the factor walked out with that piece of paper, the collection of papers, and said, they didn't read it properly. It didn't say 1 year, it said 10 years. Now there's no country in this world where bonded labor or slavery is legal. But imagine if you've never been to school, imagine if you can't read or write, imagine if the wealthy person in the village says they'll call the police to enforce a contract. Imagine if you don't know your most basic rights. I know there are those days, and there are those days, and maybe even today might have been one of those days, where the alarm clock goes off, or your parents are like waking you to get you out of bed, and there's a part of you that just wants to pull into the covers and say, I don't want to go to school today. But for so many people, that's their greatest dream. Imagine never being able to read or write. Imagine never being able to even count the money that you earn without that basic education. We're looking at parts of Asia Pacific. I'll never forget, we took part in a raid. And in this one raid, there were young girls who were being sold into prostitution. And the part I'll never forget, though, about it was two aspects. One, seeing them reunited with their families afterwards. Seeing their parents hold them so tightly and refuse to let them go. And then seeing them go through the rehabilitation process, as afterwards they went through psychosocial counseling. And part of it they called lancing the wound. They talked about what happened to them, breaking down the stigma. But hearing these girls describe the reality brought not only them to tears, but all of us. Some of these kids were incredibly young. Or looking at parts of Africa. I had a chance to take a sneak peek at Thrive, which is a youth group. They're going to be doing a workshop, and they had an image of a diamond. And they were talking about conflict diamonds, and how sometimes what we purchase indirectly might lead towards issues affecting people. Human trafficking, the realities of forced labor, bonded labor. Sierra Leone is a country where we've done a lot of work. Now, can I ask, how many of you have seen the Coney video? How many of you have heard of the Coney video? Rephrase that one. Everyone. Now, what happened in Sierra Leone was what similarly happened that Coney video talked about, but it was focused in one West African country, and to be candid, it was even worse than the brutality. Because what happened is they would go to the schools and recruit child soldiers, force kids to join. And how they would recruit is always the same way. They would fill the schools with bullet holes. And they would empty out, bring all the children and all the teachers forward. They would line up the teachers and systematically execute. The reason being is because teachers taught girls. And teachers protected the children from being recruited as child soldiers. And schools were the safe space where people would gather. And they knew that if you destroyed the school, if you killed the teachers, you broke the backbone of a community. And they would give the children one of two choices. One choice is to join the rebels. And they would make a decision in the temple and use a mixture called brown bran. It was cocaine and gunpowder. And when they would mix it into the bloodstream, kids would become mentally unstable, and they would then be forced to kill or maim a family member. That way these kids would never try to run away. Their only home would become the rebels. Or the other choice was to have their right hand amputated so they never carried a gun on behalf of the government. There's stories like this, literally in the millions. We live in a world where today there's 27 million slaves. Now we of course think of Africa, Asia, Latin America, but also even in parts of the developed world. It's a huge economy. Why does it exist in our modern day? Why today, in the 21st century, would slavery still exist? Well, just in the industrialized, wealthy countries, It generates $15 billion worth of profits. In Canada alone, the RCMP, our federal police, believe that 700 people are trafficked just into the sex trade in this country. We think of it as halfway around the world. But you want to know what's the most shocking stat of all? Most don't get punished for it. We don't talk about it. We see Sunday morning commercials that appeal for help. We see full pages in the newspapers on a lot of different issues. But not this one. There's so many stigmas and stereotypes and taboos, but we need to have a conversation about the reality of human trafficking. The fact that it exists today, but most importantly, the fact that we can do something to help. You know, those volunteers that we showed all around you, there are a lot of amazing organizations working on human trafficking issues. But I want to do a shout out based right here in your own community. NASHI is a great way to get involved. One click online, you can become a volunteer. Whether it be raising awareness, events like this one, talking about it, websites, social media. Tomorrow, for example, they're organizing an event where there's an open kind of coffee house style, poetry, spoken word, there's documentaries that they show, or whether it be raising funds. In this case, soon they'll be opening a new safe haven in Ukraine for young girls who are at risk to protect them. Simple actions that make a massive difference. You know, a lot of their focus, especially Eastern Europe, also Canada, if you're passionate about what's going on in our own borders, phenomenal way to get involved. We see it also. Free the Children, when we started, people looked at us and they said, you're kids. You can't change things, you're too young. You know, I imagine some of you probably have heard this, or some of you may even have thought this. We used to hear, wait. Wait until you graduate. Wait until you become an adult. Wait until you get a good job. Wait until you reach a level of influence. Wait. The world can't wait. When we started Free the Children, people looked at us and said, you're young, you're naive, you're idealistic, you're in grade 7. When we ran it through high school, they said you can't change things. Well, this is us today. More than 45 countries. Canadian students who have gotten involved and reached out on this issue and others all around the world. You know, we started just looking at the issue of child labor. And as we would work in freeing kids and reintegrating to their families, we realized, of course, they need schools, education. But one of the reasons why girls couldn't go to school is because they walked far distances every day to get dirty, polluted water from rivers. Imagine not having a tap. Imagine not having water available. They made this walk during daylight hours to save time, so they couldn't go to school. So we started to introduce clean water projects. But one of the other reasons why kids leave school is when family members get ill, the eldest child, often the eldest girl, will take care of sick family members. So we started medical projects to ensure that children and their families could continue with their education, and setting up small businesses owned by the community so they had the means to lift themselves out of poverty, to never ever have to sell a child, to make a difficult choice, to be tricked, to be forced. We call it Adopt a Village. Now, when we started, people looked at us and said, you're too young. We said we wanted to build one school, people laughed at us. When we built that one school, we said we wanted to build 10 schools, and they said, kids can't do that. And then we built 10 schools, we said we want to build 100 schools. And they said, you'll never achieve the goal. But in your heart, if you know it's right, if you're passionate, if you turn to your friends, call upon the help of teachers, and reach out, I want to share with you today what Free the Children has become. So how did we go from 12-year-olds to where we grew? Simple. The want help. These are all schools just in Saskatchewan. We've got involved. Some of them are literally here today. Whether it be getting involved in the Poverty Hearts campaign, taking a vow of silence. Actually, this is one that was tied explicitly to the issue of human trafficking, child soldiers, the realities around the world. It's a campaign we do where students, for 24 hours, do not speak. No speaking, no email, no Facebook, no Twitter. Silence. For those who don't have a voice, as a result of poverty, of war, of human trafficking. You know, schools that dream up the most amazing fundraisers. Carlton dreamt up Stop the Music, Buy a Brick, grad shows, and yes, even a pie in the face, with the help of very, very understanding and very nice teachers. You know, donating for clean water projects in South America, or carrying water in a water walk to symbolize the reality for kids all around the world, and the reality that so many of these girls don't have a chance to go to school because they made it that way. Halloween for hunger, trick-or-treating for local food banks to help tackle hunger in our own communities, or adopting a village in Sierra Leone, West Africa, helping to rebuild after the war, former child soldiers, children who also were forced to fight. By the way, 40% of child soldiers are girls. This is not just something affecting boys. Helping to rebuild lives. Or reaching out for the drought in East Africa. You know, we live in a world where there is more than enough. We live in a world where last year we spent $18 billion on makeup and cosmetics. $18 billion. That's more than it would take to buy basic food for every person in this world. We spent $15 billion on perfume. 3 times what it would take to provide universal primary education. You know, if you want a few more stats, we spent $11 billion eating ice cream just in Europe, which is more than it would take to provide antiretroviral drugs, the drugs that fight AIDS for every person in Africa. Or the fact that we spent $40 billion last year on golf. Or the fact that we spent $1 trillion on weapons of war. We live in a world where there is more than enough. And we believe this doesn't need to exist. 250,000 child soldiers, this doesn't need to exist. 10 million girls forced to marry at an early age, this doesn't need to exist anymore. Now, if you think it's a crazy idea that we can end poverty, if you think it's impossible to dream, it isn't. You know, when you look through human history to look at how the slave trade has helped to be fought so far, I want to introduce to you a man named William Wilberforce. How many people have ever heard of him? Few. Ask your teachers. This man is amazing. So he had this crazy dream, people laughed at him. He said that we should no longer be able to buy and sell people and legally trade them across the Atlantic, the slaves that were brought to North America. He fought his entire life on this issue, and shortly before he died, the British Parliament passed a rule that their navy would enforce the end of the slave trade across the Atlantic, the high seas. Then there's Samuel E. Cornish. He introduced the first black-owned newspaper. It was a cry for freedom. In fact, that was actually the name of it. And it helped to move forward the conversation on changing the world. Sojourner Truth, she helped to galvanize the women's movement so that women raised their voices to help end the slave trade. Then we have Abraham Lincoln, who frees the slaves in the United States. Then we have Rosa Parks, who refused to sit at the back of an Alabama bus and who starts a fight for racial equality. And today, the United States has an African-American president in the most powerful office in the country. It's not an easy fight. It's one that's stretched across generations, stretched across oceans. But that is what's possible when we come together. Ending the slave trade seemed like a crazy dream in the time of William Wilberforce. But today, there's still 27 million slaves, but almost around the world, it is illegal. In almost every region, people are fighting to push this to the edge. And we can create a world where no longer slavery has to exist. And I believe students will be involved at the forefront to making that happen. If you've ever doubted the power of students to change the world, you're not alone. You're not alone when you start a volunteer action. You're not alone when you take action on a cause. When you stand up for what you believe in, you're standing with groups like National, with Free the Children, with so many organizations across the country, with so many groups of students who have found what's their calling, what's the issue they care about. How many of you have ever heard of We Day? So this is an event that now happens in cities all across Canada, where we bring together 20,000 students in each city, where they earn their way in through service. 3.4 million volunteer hours logged by Canadian students, 2 million pounds of food collected for local food banks, 5 million hours of silence, 5,700 schools across this country participating and raising $20 million for 500 different causes. When we started, we were 1, and then 12, and then our school, and then our neighborhood, and then our city, and then our province. Today, when we bring together students in our organization to raise their voice against human trafficking, to speak out for a better world, for the issues they believe in, I want to share with you a glimpse of what that looks like.
Born out of a dream.
2 brothers 5 years ago.
Fueled by the desire for change.
By the hope that the world can be a better place.
They called it We Day. Born out of a dream. A call that brings a generation together.
For all issues young people care about.
More than an event, it launches a year of actions for social change. You can't buy a ticket to We Day.
You earn it through service.
Tens of thousands in attendance. Hundreds of thousands watching online.
Millions watching on TV.
Born out of a dream for us to be better.
For the world to be better.
Youth is not wasted on the young. We Day is our generation. We Day is the movement of our time.
to better our global community. And we make that commitment today.
World peace, genuine peace, must come through inner peace. We are each other's home.
Yeah, Nelly, we love you. We miss you.
We all have to work together as a team to make the world better. I suffer from depression.
There is no room like this room anywhere on the planet.
We're not asked to do great things. We're asked to do all things with great care.
I stand here in front of you as living proof that we can redefine what is possible.
No matter how old you are, how young you are,
You're not alone when you stand up for what you believe in. You're not alone when you choose to speak out. You're not alone when you choose to raise your voice, because hundreds of thousands of students across this country are raising it right with you. Now, when I started for the children, it was because of a headline that said, "Battle child labor, boy 12 murdered." But imagine the day when instead we see this headline. And imagine if you're part of making it a reality. And it's very possible. 27 million slaves in this world. Now that is the lowest ever as a percentage of our human population. It is being squeezed to the corners, but we're not there yet. We need people to raise their voices. We need people to tell others. We need people to go online. We need people to create Facebook pages. We need people to put it out on social media. We need people to show up at events to make their voice counted. We need people to raise their voice in their schools. We need fundraisers, awareness raisers, petitions, letters to the Prime Minister. Imagine what we can do. So here's my question to you. If you are willing to tell one person, a family member, a friend, one person, about what you're going to learn today through the workshops, through the sessions, if you're willing to make that promise, would you please stand? Please rise. Now make it a little tougher. If you're willing to go online, to start to educate yourself more, to check out a social media page, maybe nashi.ca or other organizations, you're willing to not let this end today. You're willing to educate yourself. Would you please stand? Thank you. Now, if you're willing to volunteer on this issue, if you're willing to come out, there's an event tomorrow. They're organizing a coffee house. In September, they have a run, a walk to raise awareness and funds. In March, they do a giant pierogi sale. If you're willing to volunteer at one of those events, you pick, whatever it is. Would you please stand? Please rise. Now here's the biggest one of all, and don't stand unless you're going to really do this. Would you be willing to create something in your school this year or next year? Some action, a poster, an announcement, a speech, a PowerPoint, a Facebook group, a club, whatever you want, but would you be willing to be a student leader on this issue? If you would you please stand? Take a minute and look around, look at those faces, and look at your friends, and look who to go to get their help to take action. Please grab a seat. Look at your teacher who's with you today. That is a great support. Look at all the volunteers in blue through the workshops today. You'll be learning about fair trade. You'll be learning about how to get your message out in social media. You'll be learning about how to talk to family and friends. You'll be learning about how to take action. Now, it won't be easy. It won't. And there'll be moments where you're trying to tell someone about this and they might shrug you off. And you've got to be persistent. There'll be moments where you'll think to yourself, I know I said I was going to volunteer, but really good TV show. There'll be moments where you might choose to take action in your school and people might even tease you for it. They might say, you can't change things. In those moments, I want to leave you with a final thought, please. A final story. It takes place here, in Sierra Leone, West Africa. And it's about forced labor. It's about slavery. It's about slavery in the diamond mines. Now, you're going to hear a workshop later on today about conflict diamonds. Diamonds that we buy in Canada, the States, around the world, where people have been forced to work in mines. And one of the reasons why that exists is because children have been forced to fight in those wars. I described Sierra Leone. in West Africa, that war where children were forcibly recruited. And this boy, this young man now, is from that region. I met him in Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone. His name is Santos, and I'd ask you to take a moment and to please look at the photo, because this is an image you'll probably never see again. He's not famous. He'll never be on the front page of Time magazine. He'll never win a Nobel Peace Prize, although he absolutely deserves to. He was in the 8th grade when he was what they call in Sierra Leone the head boy. It's like a student council president. And when the rebels came to his village, they did what they always did. They burned the schools, they executed the teachers, and they gave these two choices: to either join the rebels or to have their right hand amputated to face the consequences. And Santos, realizing that he was now in charge, that the teachers had been killed, that he was the head boy, he spoke up in defense of his school. He said in front of everyone, looking straight at the rebel commander, he said in his language, "Mr. Rebel Commander, our village believes in peace. Please leave now." Now the rebel commander was so incensed that a boy would stand up against him, that he mockingly asked Santos, "Do you want short sleeves or long sleeves? Meaning, do you want to lose your hand at the wrist or at the elbow?" And Santos, he repeated the same words. He said, "Mr. Rebel Commander, our village believes in peace. Please leave now." Now, I met many in Santos' village, and they remember that when he said that, he was holding his hand high in the air, and everyone mentioned how he was wiggling his fingers. And the rebel commander purposely took a dull machete. Santos created a tourniquet to stop the bleeding, and he walked for hours until he made it to the border, and he collapsed into the arms of an organization called Doctors Without Borders. He was in Guinea at the time, a neighboring country, and they saved his life. And after Santos did what he did, after he stood up in front of his school to say these words, another student was inspired to put up his hand to say the same words. And after he said that, another student put up his hand and said the same words. And the rebel commander realized nobody would join. The rebel commander burned the school to the ground, but he left the rest of the students untouched. When I met Santos, he told me how he was back in school. He said he taught himself using his left hand how to carve. And he made these statues. He'd sell them to the peacekeepers. And he earned enough money to send himself and even his brother and his sister to school. And I told him how I couldn't imagine the courage required to know in your heart what is right. To stand up in defense of your friends in front of your school. But knowing the consequences, I couldn't imagine the courage that took. And Santos looked at me when I said that to him, and his eyes went to the ground, and he stammered, and he said that wasn't the hardest part. He said in Sierra Leone, there had been a general amnesty. Almost everyone was set free. Almost everyone. Just a few people were charged. Some of you may have read in the newspaper last week, Charles Taylor, the head of this, was found guilty for crimes against humanity. But almost everyone was set free. And one day, Santos was back home, and it was market day where all the neighboring villages come together to buy and trade and sell in the market. And Santos saw in the market, in his own village, he saw the rebel commander walking free. He saw the man who had chopped off his own hand walking free in his village. And everyone in the village remembered what had happened, and everyone watched as Santos went up to confront him. And in front of the entire village, Santos walked up to that rebel commander. And Santos extended his left hand to shake that man's right hand as a symbol of forgiveness and of peace. And Santos was 14 years old when he made that decision. And all I can say is thank God in our lives we never have to make that same choice. But we can ensure no one ever has to make that type of choice again. We can raise our voices. We can spread the word. We can send letters to politicians. We can create Facebook pages. We can found groups in schools. We can raise funds. We can choose to volunteer. We can use our own time, energy, passion, and gifts to ensure that never happens again, that everyone is set free. And so when you leave here today, and when you go back to school tomorrow, Friday, in front of your friends, or when you're home tonight, and you're searching for the courage to tell someone about what you learned today, or searching for the courage to go to a friend and ask them to join you, or searching for the courage to do what you know is right, then I simply ask you to remember the courage of a 14-year-old boy in Sierra Leone, West Africa. Thank you again to Nashi for organizing this event. Thank you again for being here and living up to the motto of Youth Unchained, to raise your voices. And a huge thank you to all the teachers who chose to bring school groups to broaden the view of education. Thank you all, and have an amazing conference. Thank you.
Welcome you all to help me thank Keilburger for coming here today to give us this inspirational speech and showing us that there's a huge reality behind